Hey everybody, if you're new here, a big part of the channel is revisiting news and research, so today let's address some big updates surrounding Orforglipron, which isn't only because of its recent FDA approval for chronic weight management under Eli Lilly's brand name Foundayo, but because of the intriguing turn its research has taken, a new suggestion of possible therapeutic value we haven't really seen in this space. For those who haven't seen my intro video on Orforglipron, it's a once-daily, orally bioavailable, non-peptide, small molecule GLP-1 receptor agonist. Unlike most of the GLP-1 therapies, Orforglipron isn't injectable. It's a synthetically created small molecule that can effectively be taken by mouth and still bind with high affinity to human GLP-1 receptors, because the core of GLP-1 efficacy usually comes down to a few major metabolic levers: appetite suppression, delayed gastric emptying, increased glucose-dependent insulin secretion, and decreased glucagon release. Now, I want to go over how semaglutide operates versus how Orforglipron does. I glossed over it in my last video, and I think to fully understand how these two are different, it's something worth diving into. You might want to take a sip of coffee for this one. GLP-1 receptors exist in many different parts of the body. Now, it's the density of these receptors in different tissue types that's responsible for semaglutide's potent effects on weight loss and metabolism, as well as its notorious GI side effect profile. For instance, three of the most clinically relevant sites packed with GLP-1 receptors are the pancreatic beta cells, different parts of the brain, and the duodenum of the small intestine. So it's unsurprising people who take it have enhanced insulin release and decreased desire to eat. And because certain parts of the brain that control nausea, like the area postrema, are packed with these receptors and sit outside the blood-brain barrier, directly exposed to the drug in the bloodstream, it's also unsurprising that people experience nausea alongside vomiting, constipation, diarrhea, you name it. Now, when somebody injects a GLP-1 agonist, it's subcutaneously absorbed, collecting in the tissue of the arm or the belly, wherever it's injected. Then, after some time, because of structural modifications that promote albumin binding, it sticks around in circulation much longer than the native GLP-1. From there, it binds these different receptors and exerts their activity through a variety of signaling cascades. Signaling cascades are what they sound like. One thing binds another, and as a result, there are a ton of different pathways activated, all of which interact with their own many features of our anatomy and physiology. It's like a waterfall atop a mountain, drains downward, and by the time it gets to the bottom, there's a bunch of other waterfalls, ponds, what have you. The main one to remember here is something called CAMP, cyclic AMP, a messenger molecule inside the cell that drives many of the downstream effects we care about, especially insulin secretion, while broader GLP-1 receptor signaling also feeds into appetite suppression and slowed gastric emptying. When semaglutide binds the GLP-1 receptor, it strongly activates CAMP production as a high-efficacy agonist. Now, semaglutide activates these different pathways and exerts its effects, but within minutes, there's recruitment of these proteins called arrestins that understandably arrest the drug's activity. After beta-arrestin 1 and beta-arrestin 2 are recruited to the cell's surface, they work to stop these signaling cascades while internalizing the semaglutide GLP-1 receptor complex. From there, some of these complexes are broken down while others are recycled back to the surface to be activated again. It's a constant cycle, and with continuous drug exposure over days, the balance gradually tips toward more breakdown than recycling. And this is where Orforglipron enters the scene. It binds the same GLP-1 receptor and kicks off overlapping signaling cascades. But because of its unique structure as a small molecule rather than a peptide, it sits in a different part of the receptor. And that different binding position means it activates the same signaling pathways, including that CAMP signal, not in an identical signaling pattern as semaglutide, but still robustly, and with almost no beta-arrestin recruitment. So those arrestins we just talked about that arrest the drug's activity and pull the receptor inside the cell to be broken down, they barely show up. The receptor stays on the surface, keeps signaling, and doesn't get chewed up as fast. It's like the waterfall keeps flowing without giving a damn. So that's the nuts and bolts of the pharmacology. Now let's talk about what Orforglipron's actually been shown to do in people. In April of this year, 2026, it was FDA approved under the brand name Foundayo for chronic weight management. The approval was largely based on the ATTAIN-1 trial, a phase 3 study of over 3,100 adults with obesity published in the New England Journal of Medicine. Now, a quick note here, the trial used an investigational capsule formulation with doses labeled as 6, 12, and 36 milligrams. The commercial tablet that's actually on pharmacy shelves has different dosing strengths, maxing out at 17.2 milligrams once daily. But the FDA considers these equivalent, so when you see 36 milligrams in the published trial and 17.2 milligrams on the label, they're referring more or less to the same exposure. At that highest equivalent dose, depending on the estimand used, people enrolled lost roughly 11 to 12% of their body weight over 72 weeks. More than half lost at least 10%, and about a fifth lost 20% or more. For context, and these are cross-trial comparisons, not head-to-head, injectable semaglutide at 2.4 milligrams weekly has shown around 15% weight loss, and Tirzepatide has shown over 20%. So Orforglipron doesn't quite match the injectables in raw weight loss potency. I acknowledge that all these values seem like lightweight numbers with all these recent videos on Retatrutide I've made, but it crosses the 10% threshold that's oftentimes associated with meaningful improvements in blood pressure, glycemic control, triglycerides, liver fat, and broader metabolic risk. It's funny how 5-10 years ago we'd see 10% weight loss and be mind blown. Now if somebody starts one of these meds and doesn't lose 10% of their body weight, you have an existential crisis. But I digress. There was also a parallel trial, ATTAIN-2, in people with both obesity and type 2 diabetes, same drug, same dose, and the highest dose group lost about 9.6% of their body weight, and their HbA1c dropped significantly. In fact, a separate head-to-head trial called ACHIEVE-3 showed Orforglipron wasn't only non-inferior, but actually superior to oral semaglutide, so semaglutide taken by mouth for blood sugar control. Though it's worth noting, Orforglipron also came with higher rates of gastrointestinal side effects and a modest bump in heart rate compared to oral semaglutide in that trial. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this part I think changes the conversation around the medication. There's a trial called ATTAIN-MAINTAIN, published in Nature Medicine in May 26. It took a look at folks who had already been on injectable semaglutide or Tirzepatide, people who've already lost weight and hit a plateau, and transitioned them to oral Orforglipron or placebo, and the injectable medication was stopped. So the question was simple: if someone stops their injectable, can a daily pill hold the line? And the answer was yes, significantly so. Enrollees who'd been on semaglutide and switched to Orforglipron maintained about 79% of their weight loss over a year. Those who switched to placebo, only about 38%. For the Tirzepatide group, it was 75% maintained with Orforglipron versus 49% with placebo, which is pretty cool and a pretty unique angle, because one of the biggest questions in this space is what happens when people stop the injection. We know from the Step 1 extension data that people regain roughly 2/3 of their lost weight within a year of stopping semaglutide, so the idea that you could use an injectable to get the heavy lifting done, lose 15-20% of body weight, and then transition to a daily oral pill to maintain most of that loss, that's a new therapeutic paradigm. It reframes Orforglipron not just as a standalone weight loss drug, but as a potential maintenance strategy after injectable GLP-1 therapy. To be clear, it doesn't prove that switching to Orforglipron is better than simply staying on semaglutide or Tirzepatide, depending on goals and people's response and whatnot, but the study did not include a continued injectable comparator arm, which is a pretty important limitation if we're asking whether this is a replacement strategy versus a convenience or maintenance strategy. One more thing on the safety side that's worth mentioning, and it applies to the entire GLP-1 class, is that Foundayo carries a boxed warning regarding the risk of thyroid C-cell tumors. In rodent studies, other GLP-1 receptor agonists that are pharmacologically active in rats and mice have caused thyroid C-cell adenomas and carcinomas. The nuance is that Orforglipron is actually not pharmacologically active in rats or mice, and it didn't produce tumors in rodent studies, but because it's active at the human GLP-1 receptor, the FDA still considers the risk theoretically possible, and the human relevance hasn't yet been quite determined, so the label carries that same class-wide boxed warning. As such, it's contraindicated in anyone with a personal or family history of medullary thyroid carcinoma or multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2. No cases of medullary thyroid cancer were reported in the ATTAIN-1 trial, but it's something people people in general should be aware of. I'm curious to see where the research heads, as orforglipron's rolled out to more people who are either at their plateau point or who no longer want to use an injectable GLP-1 agonist. Not to mention there are arguable human upsides to using a small molecule rather than a peptide. Wouldn't have to be refrigerated, it's likely less costly to produce. Whether that translates to cheaper cost for people eventually, I don't know given the booming pharmaceutical economy of these medications right now, but it's a thought. And one more thing, there's no fasting requirement. With oral semaglutide, it's recommended people take it on an empty stomach with no more than 4 ounces of water and a 30-minute wait before eating. Orforglipron doesn't come with these same restrictions, and for what it's worth has much greater oral bioavailability, about 79% compared to the famously low oral bioavailability of oral semaglutide, which is generally under 2%. Its adverse effect profile is generally consistent with the GLP-1 class, GI effect heavy understandably, though head-to-head data against oral semaglutide did show somewhat higher rates of nausea and vomiting with orforglipron, as well as a modest bump in heart rate. That's all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Best way to help me out if you enjoy this evidence-based, oftentimes peptide-related content, the best way to help me out is to like and subscribe. I'll leave a link to the Patreon too if others are interested in supporting. Feel free to check it out. Most importantly, you have a great day. Take care, and I'll see you soon.
Cut to the chase, evidence-based. Pull up a chair, let's get this straight. Peptide buddy, he's your peptide buddy.